On the desolate, windswept plains of Tarlock 7, life was hard and unforgiving. The planet, with its crimson skies and jagged mountain ranges, seemed determined to repel those who dared to settle there. Yet, amidst the unrelenting harshness, various alien species had carved out a tenuous existence, building small colonies that huddled together against the ever-present threat of the wild. The most feared and whispered about danger, however, wasn't the relentless storms or the lurking predators of the night, but something far more sinister: the garag. The garag was more than a creature. It was a legend, a living nightmare that haunted the minds of every inhabitant. Towering above even the tallest beings, with a hide as tough as the planet's unforgiving rocks, the garag had earned a reputation for destruction that could chill the heart of even the bravest warrior. The stories told of entire colonies decimated in mere minutes, of barriers shattered as if they were nothing more than twigs. And so, when the garag was finally exiled to the Forbidden Zone, a desolate area far beyond the safety of the colonies, there was relief, but also a deep, lingering fear that it could one day return. In the midst of this fear-ridden world lived Lily, a young human girl whose spirit was as bright as the planet was bleak. Unlike the adults who shivered at the mere mention of the Forbidden Zone, Lily's curiosity about the unknown was insatiable. Where others saw danger, she saw adventure. The Forbidden Zone, with its eerie silence and the mysterious shadow that was the garag, called to her in a way she couldn't quite explain. It was as if something in that barren wasteland was waiting for her. One day, driven by a sense of wonder and defiance, Lily ventured beyond the safe boundaries of her colony. The air was thick with anticipation, every step taking her closer to the place where no one dared to go. Her heart pounded in her chest as the landscape grew more desolate, the ground beneath her feet more treacherous. And then she saw it, an enormous figure, standing motionless in the distance. The garag. Fear gripped Lily, her breath catching in her throat. Every tale she had heard, every warning the adults had given, screamed at her to run. But something about the creature made her stay rooted to the spot. As she watched, the garag turned its massive head, and for a moment their eyes met. Instead of the mindless rage she expected, Lily saw something else: pain, loneliness, and a quiet sorrow that seemed out of place in such a monstrous being. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, Lily took a step forward, then another. The garag, so feared and reviled, did nothing. It merely watched her with eyes that seemed far too intelligent, far too understanding. In that moment, Lily realized the creature before her was not the monster the stories had painted it to be. There was something deeper, something tragic in its gaze. The colony's fear of the garag was palpable, but as Lily stood there, she couldn't shake the feeling that the stories weren't entirely true. There was more to this beast than met the eye. The thought echoed in her mind as she slowly backed away, her heart still racing but her fear now mixed with a profound sense of wonder. She knew, deep down, that this encounter was just the beginning of a mystery far larger than herself. Lily couldn't shake the image of the garag from her mind. The creature that had once been the source of her nightmares now seemed more like a tragic figure, wounded and alone. Each day, the pull to return grew stronger, and eventually, she found herself back at the edge of the Forbidden Zone. This time, she wasn't empty-handed. She had brought food, simple offerings she hoped might bridge the gap between fear and trust. Approaching cautiously, Lily placed the food on the ground and stepped back. The garag, towering and formidable, regarded her with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. It didn't move immediately, but eventually it stepped forward, cautiously accepting her gift. The bond was fragile, like a thread woven from the finest silk, but it was there, a connection between a young girl and a creature that the world had abandoned. Over the days that followed, Lily continued her visits, each time bringing food, each time tending to the wounds that marred the garag's massive frame. She could see the pain in its eyes, not just from the physical injuries but from something deeper. The garag's acceptance of her care wasn't instant, but gradual, each small gesture met with a cautious response. And in those quiet moments, as she gently cleaned its wounds, Lily began to see the intelligence and sensitivity in the creature's gaze. This wasn't a mindless beast, but a being capable of understanding, perhaps even emotion. One day, as Lily sat beside the garag, she felt something shift in the air, a subtle change that seemed to ripple through the space between them. The garag's eyes met hers, and in that moment she felt a flood of images and emotions that weren't her own. She saw a peaceful settlement, alien yet serene, where life thrived in harmony. And then, she saw the garag, standing defiant, refusing to carry out the orders that had been given to it, orders to destroy that settlement in a brutal show of power. The garag's defiance had cost it everything. Cast out by its own kind, branded a traitor, it had been exiled to Tarlock 7, left to suffer in isolation. The story that had been told to the colonists, the story of a mindless monster, was a lie. The garag's only crime had been an act of mercy, an act of resistance against the violence that had defined its species for so long. As the images faded, Lily's heart ached with the weight of the truths she had uncovered. The realization hit her with the force of a tidal wave. The garag was not a monster, it was a victim, a creature that had chosen compassion over cruelty and paid the price for it. This knowledge deepened Lily's resolve. She couldn't abandon the garag, not now, not ever. It was more than a beast to her, it was a friend, a kindred spirit who had been wronged by the very beings who should have protected it. But as the bond between Lily and the garag grew stronger, so did the tension back in the colony. Her absence hadn't gone unnoticed, and whispers of her ventures into the forbidden zone began to spread. The adults, already on edge from the mere existence of the garag, were quick to assume the worst. Fear gripped the colony, a fear that something terrible was about to happen. The walls that had kept them safe now seemed fragile, the barriers of stone and steel suddenly insufficient against the shadow that loomed beyond. Lily could sense the unease, feel the eyes watching her with suspicion. But she couldn't stop, not now that she knew the truth. The garag needed her, and perhaps she needed it just as much. As the days passed, the tension in the colony mounted, like a storm gathering strength, ready to break at any moment. And in the midst of it all, Lily's determination only grew stronger. She would protect the garag, no matter the cost, for she had seen the truth, and it was worth fighting for. The peace of Tarlock 7 was shattered by the arrival of the Hunters, a group of hardened alien warriors whose reputation preceded them. They descended upon the planet with a swagger that only those accustomed to power could carry. To them, Tarlock 7 was nothing more than another wild frontier, and the garag, just another trophy to add to their growing collection. Their ship, a sleek, ominous craft, landed with an arrogant disregard for the life that clung so tenuously to the planet's surface. These hunters had come for one purpose: to capture or kill the garag, not out of any sense of duty or necessity, but for sport. The stories of the garag's strength, of the destruction it could wreak, had reached their ears, and they had seen it as a challenge, a chance to prove their dominance. They had no regard for the delicate balance of life on Tarlock 7, nor did they care about the fear that the garag had instilled in the colonists. To them, everything was expendable, including the creature they sought to conquer. Lily heard the news of their arrival from whispered conversations among the colonists, who were both relieved and terrified. The hunters, they believed, would rid them of the garag once and for all, but at what cost? The thought of losing the garag filled Lily with a dread that she had never felt before. This creature, once feared, had become her friend, and the idea of it being hunted like an animal was unbearable. Fear gripped her, but so did a fierce determination. She knew she couldn't stand by and let this happen. The garag had been through enough, exiled, wounded, misunderstood. It didn't deserve to die at the hands of these callous hunters. But what could she do? She was just a child, and they were seasoned warriors, armed with the most advanced technology the galaxy had to offer. Despite the odds, Lily made her decision. She would warn the garag, give it a chance to escape or fight back. The thought of facing the hunters terrified her, but the bond she had formed with the garag gave her strength. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions, not now. Her resolve was tested with every step she took towards the forbidden zone, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a heavy burden. When the hunters finally tracked the garag down, it was in a clearing deep within the forbidden zone. The creature stood tall, its wounds still healing, but its spirit unbroken. The hunters, confident and cruel, prepared to strike, their weapons humming with deadly energy. But before they could move, a small figure stepped out from the shadows, placing herself between them and their prey. It was Lily, her heart pounding but her stance unwavering. She knew the danger she was in, knew that these hunters wouldn't hesitate to harm her if it meant getting to the garag. But she didn't back down. Her voice, though small, carried the weight of her conviction as she pleaded with them to leave the creature alone. She told them of the garag's true nature, of the mercy it had shown, of the injustice of its exile. The hunters were taken aback, not by her words, but by her audacity. Who was this child to stand in their way? Their leader, a towering figure with eyes as cold as the void, sneered at her, dismissing her words as the naive ramblings of a foolish girl. He raised his weapon, intending to push her aside, but the garag moved before he could act. The beast, sensing the threat to Lily, stepped forward, its massive form casting a shadow over her. It let out a low growl, a warning that the hunters could not ignore. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Back in the colony, word of Lily's actions spread like wildfire. The colonists, who had been so quick to condemn the garag, now found themselves questioning their own fear. If a child could stand up to the hunters, could defy the terror that had gripped them for so long, then what excuse did they have? Some felt ashamed, others emboldened, but all were affected by the courage they had witnessed. Lily's bravery had lit a spark, one that began to burn away the fear and apathy that had taken root in the colony. As the hunters stood before the garag, weapons at the ready, they found themselves facing not just a beast, but a force that they hadn't anticipated, a force born of compassion, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a little girl and the creature she had come to care for. As the standoff between Lily, the garag, and the hunters unfolded, something remarkable began to happen. From the edges of the Forbidden Zone, figures started to emerge, colonists who had been watching from a distance, their hearts stirred by the bravery of the young girl who dared to face down the hunters. The fear that had once paralyzed them was melting away, replaced by a sense of purpose they hadn't felt in years. Slowly, they gathered around Lily and the garag, forming a protective barrier between the creature and the hunters. These colonists were no longer driven by fear but by a newfound resolve. They had seen enough violence, enough senseless destruction, and in Lily's courage, they found the strength to stand up for what was right. They were tired of living in the shadow of terror, and they realized that the garag wasn't their enemy. It was a victim, just like them, exiled and misunderstood. The collective resolve of the colonists was palpable, their unity a force stronger than any weapon the hunters could wield. The hunters, who had arrived with such arrogance, found themselves outnumbered not by warriors but by ordinary people who refused to let fear dictate their actions any longer. The leader of the hunters sneered, raising his weapon as if to challenge the colonists. But before he could act, something extraordinary happened. The garag, sensing the desperation of the moment, closed its eyes, and a wave of energy seemed to ripple through the air. In an instant, every mind present was filled with images and emotions, a silent communication that transcended words. The garag was speaking to them, not with a voice, but with thoughts, shared directly into their consciousness. It showed them its past, its refusal to commit a senseless act of violence, its exile, and the deep sorrow it carried for the lives it could not save. The garag expressed its desire for peace, its longing to be understood, and its gratitude for the kindness Lily had shown. It was a plea not for mercy, but for understanding, for a chance to live without being hunted, to find a place where it could belong. The hunters were stunned. They had come expecting to face a mindless beast, something they could kill without a second thought. But what they encountered was an intelligence that rivaled their own, a creature capable of deep emotion and complex thought. The bond between the garag and Lily was undeniable, and it forced them to question everything they had believed about their mission. Was this truly a creature that deserved to die? Or had they been blinded by their own arrogance, unable to see the value of a life simply because it was different? The garag's telepathic communication was not just with the hunters, but with the colonists as well. They saw, for the first time, the full extent of the creature's suffering, the injustice of its exile, and the nobility of its refusal to harm the innocent. It was a story that resonated deeply with them, stirring feelings of compassion and solidarity. They realized that by protecting the garag, they were not just standing up for a single life, but for the principles of mercy and justice that they had long been too afraid to defend. With Lily by its side, the garag made a final plea for peace. It didn't want more bloodshed, didn't want to harm anyone. All it sought was a chance to live in harmony with those who had shown it kindness, to find a place among them where it could heal and be free from the endless cycle of violence. The sincerity of the garag's plea was unmistakable, and it left the hunters with a decision they hadn't expected to face. The leader of the hunters hesitated, the weight of his weapon suddenly heavy in his hands. He looked around at his team, at the colonists who stood firm, and finally at the garag, whose eyes, filled with intelligence and sorrow, held his gaze. The arrogance that had driven him here was fading, replaced by a deep, uncomfortable uncertainty. This wasn't a hunt anymore. It was a moral quandary that he was ill-prepared to resolve. In the end, the decision was made not by force, but by the power of compassion and understanding. The hunters, confronted with the truth of the garag's nature and the solidarity of the colonists, chose to lower their weapons. They backed away, their mission undone not by battle, but by the simple, undeniable truth that some lives are worth more than the thrill of the hunt. As they retreated to their ship, the tension in the air dissipated, leaving behind a profound sense of relief and the beginning of something new. The garag, no longer a feared exile, had found its place among the colonists, not as a beast, but as a protector, a symbol of the power that comes from choosing peace over violence, and understanding over fear. The hunters, once so confident in their mission, now found themselves outmatched not by physical strength, but by the sheer force of conviction displayed by a small girl and the people who had rallied around her. The garag's silent plea had touched something deep within them, forcing them to confront the hollow nature of their hunt. The tension that had held everyone in its grip slowly eased as the hunters, with a mix of reluctance and newfound respect, chose to lower their weapons and retreat. Their departure was more than just a tactical withdrawal. It was an acknowledgement that there are battles not worth fighting, that some victories can only be won by walking away. For the colonists, the withdrawal of the hunters marked a turning point in their lives. They had faced their deepest fears and, through unity and compassion, had emerged victorious without a single shot fired. It was a victory not just over the hunters, but over the fear that had kept them isolated and distrustful. The garag, once a symbol of terror, was now a part of their community, a protector, no longer exiled but embraced. The beast's decision to stay with the humans was a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been formed, a bond forged not through bloodshed, but through understanding and shared purpose. The transformation within the colony was palpable. Where once there had been suspicion and fear, now there was a sense of belonging, of shared destiny. The garag, with its immense strength and newfound role as guardian, became a living symbol of the power of compassion and the potential for change. The walls that had once been built to keep danger out were now the boundaries of a community united by a common goal: to live in peace, to protect each other, and to ensure that fear would never again dictate their actions. The colony itself began to change. The barriers that had once kept the garag out were repurposed to protect not just the people, but the creature that had chosen to stand by them. The once fearful colonists now walked with a sense of pride, knowing they had not only defended their home, but had also saved a life that had been wrong. The garag's presence, far from being a cause for alarm, became a reminder of the power that comes from standing together, of the strength that lies in mercy and understanding. And at the center of it all was Lily. Her small act of kindness, her refusal to see the garag as a monster, had changed the course of an entire community. It was her courage, her willingness to reach out to the unknown, that had sparked a transformation that no one could have predicted. The colony's elders spoke of her with a mixture of awe and gratitude, recognizing that it was her actions that had saved them, not just from the hunters, but from their own fears. Lily's legacy was not one of grand heroics, but of simple, profound humanity. She had shown that even in the face of great fear, one person's compassion could change everything. The colony would never be the same, and neither would the garag. Together, they had forged a new beginning, one built on trust, unity, and the understanding that even the most feared creatures have the capacity for goodness. And as the days turned into years, The story of Lily and the garag became a tale passed down through generations, a testament to the power of kindness and the enduring strength of the human spirit.